Welcome back for Chapter 10. Chapter 10, Day 3. Gigi comes to town. On the morning of Day 3, I was moved out of neurology ICU and ended up sharing a room with a very interesting character. This woman had been suffering from epileptic seizures, so the doctors had her head all wrapped up in a large white towel with numerous electrodes and wires protruding from her head in all directions. The wires were attached to a variety of recording devices that lined her side of the room, and although she was free to move between her bed, chair, and bathroom, she was quite the sight. I am sure all of my visitors thought she resembled Medusa. Out of boredom, she routinely struck up a conversation with everyone who looked in on me. I, on the other hand, was desperate for silence and minimal sensory stimulation. The TV noise from her half of the room was a painful suction of my energy. I was just looking around because I just found a picture of Medusa that I had colored. I found it last night, but I had colored it in I don't know, 2020-ish, 2021. All right, sorry. I considered it totally counterintuitive to my idea of what I found to be conducive for healing. Okay, so it's like her roommate's TV she doesn't feel like she can heal with that in the background. Okay, so there's all these other things going on when people are healing and they might just not know how to verbalize it or to separate it from all the other thoughts that are going on in their brain to understand that that there is this low rumble of annoyance at whatever else is going on. So it's like limiting the healing process. Okay, so take it from the perspective of, a doctor who had a stroke. Okay. There was a lot of excitement floating in the air that morning. My colleagues, Francine and Steve, had already arrived, and several doctors were milling about the immediate area. The results were in from the angiogram, and it was time to get down to the business of setting my retirement plan. I remember clearly the moment Gigi came around the corner into my room. She looked me straight in the eye and came right to my bedside. She was gracious and calm, and her hellos to those in the room said her hellos to those in the room, and then lifted my sheet and proceeded to crawl into bed with me. She immediately wrapped me in her arms, and I melted into the familiarity of her snuggle. It was an amazing moment in my life. So this is like a 37-year-old woman, and her mother came to visit her, and that instantly induced healing, okay? And so, we're going to get into energy healing in another book that we have. Somehow she understood that I was no longer her Harvard doctor daughter, but instead I was now an infant again. She says she did what any mother would have done, but I'm not so sure. Having been born to my mother was truly my first and greatest blessing. Being born to her a second time has been my greatest fortune. I felt perfectly content, all wrapped up in my mother's love. She was kind and soft and obviously freaking out a little, but overall, I thought she was nice and I liked her. It was a perfect moment for me, and who could ask for anything more? Who could ask for anything more? I was catheterized, so I never had to get out of bed, and this very nice woman walked right into my life and surrounded me with love. And then the conference began. Introductions were made, reports were in, and all the key players were present. Dr. Young set the tone and spoke directly to me as though I could understand. I appreciated that she did not simply speak to the others about me. First, she introduced Dr. Christopher Ogilvy, a neurosurgeon who specialized in arteriovenous malformations, AVMs. Dr. Ogilvy explained that the angiogram confirmed that my brain contained an AVM, and this congenital malformation was responsible for my hemorrhage. I had a history of migraine headaches that never responded to medications. As it turns out, my physicians predicted that I was not having migraines at all, but was experiencing small bleeds over the years. Ugh. Although, oh my gosh. So if you're a person with migraines yourself or know somebody, like, don't let them write it off, because a lot of people just kind of like suffer in silence with that. Because she's saying that she was having small bleeding occurring from that site many, many times over the years. Okay. So, okay. Although I could not understand much of what was being said during this powwow around my bedside, I was focused on what was being conveyed non-verbally. The expressions on people's faces, the tones of their voices, how they held their bodies as they exchanged information were fascinating to me. In a funny sort of way, I was comforted to know what the gravity of my situation did actually warrant. Oh, I was comforted to know that the gravity of my situation did actually warrant all of the fuss. No one wants to create this much commotion, only to learn that no, it was not really a heart attack, just gas. The atmosphere in the room was tense as Dr. Ogilvy described the problems with the blood vessels in my brain. When he suggested that I have a craniotomy to remove the remnants of the AVM and a clot the size of a golf ball, Gigi became unglued and her nervousness was obvious. Dr. Ogilvy further explained that if the AVM were not surgically removed, I stood the likely chance of hemorrhaging again, and next time I might not be so lucky getting help. Honestly, I didn't really understand all the details about what they were proposing to do, partly because the cells in my brain that understood language were swimming in a pool of blood, and partly because of their sheer speed of their conversation. In my condition, I thought I understood that they were planning on passing a suction instrument up through the femoral artery into my brain. The femoral artery is down like in your leg, okay, like near your femur bone. And that's a large artery. So they can pass things through because once get, they get in there, it's easy to direct it up the system. But, if they go for a small artery, they don't want to miss, and it pushes a lot of oxygenated blood through at a very we were talking earlier in the book about like how high the pressure is from the arteries. Okay, so anyway, just a little bit of unnecessary background information. All right. I thought I understood that they were planning on passing a suction instrument up through my femoral artery into my brain to suck out the excess blood and threatening tangle of vessels. I was aghast when I realized it was their plan to cut my head open. Any self respecting neuroanatomist would never allow anyone to cut their head open. Intuitively, if not academically, I understood that the pressure dynamics between the thoracic, abdominal, and cranial cavities are so delicately balanced that any major invasion, like a craniotomy, would certainly throw off all my energy dynamics completely out of whack. I figured that if they opened my head while I was already energetically compromised, I would never be able to recover my body or any of my cognition. I made it perfectly clear to everyone that under no circumstances would I ever agree to permit them to open my head. No one seemed to understand that my body was already thoroughly deflated, and I would not be able to survive another severe blow, even if it was a highly calculated one. Nevertheless, I knew I was vulnerable and at the mercy of the people in this room. The meeting ended with the craniotomy option temporarily tabled, even though it was clear to everyone except me that it was now Gigi's job to convince me to have the surgery. With tremendous compassion, Gigi intuited my fears and tried to comfort me. That's okay, sweetie. You don't have to have the surgery. No matter what, I'll take care of you. But if you don't have the AVM removed, there will always be the possibility that your brain will spit blood again. In that case, you can move in with me and I'll be attached to your hip for the rest of your life. Well, my mom is a wonderful woman. Living my life with her attached to my hip was not what I had in mind. Within a couple of days, I agreed to have the surgery to remove the AVM. It then became my job to get my body strong enough over the next few weeks to survive the pending blow. For the next few days following the stroke, my stamina waxed and waned proportionately with my napping and exerted effort. I learned, um, with my napping and exerted effort, I learned early that every effort I put forth with was the only effort that I was, wait, was the only effort that was important. Okay, so she's saying just putting any effort forth is important, right? Not like if you're doing something right or wrong. One day, for example, I had to rock and rock and rock some more before I had enough oomph to roll upward. Well, in this stage of rocking, I had to recognize that rocking was the only activity that mattered. Focusing my success on the final goal of sitting up was not wise because it was far beyond my current ability. If I had decided that sitting up was the goal and then tried and failed repeatedly on every trial, I would have been disappointed with my inability and stopped trying. By breaking the effort of sitting up into the smaller steps of rocking and then rolling upward, I found regular success along the way and celebrated accordingly with sleep. So it was my strategy to rock and then rock some more. Once I mastered rocking frequently, then I strove to rock with enthusiasm. By the time I could rock with ease, my body flowed into the next natural movement of rolling upward and then again. My efforts were all about rolling upward frequently, and then with enthusiastic vigor. Rolling upward with the enthusiasm led me right into sitting up, and I enjoyed the ongoing satisfaction of success. Essentially, I had to completely inhabit the level of ability that I could achieve before it was time to take the next step. In order to attain a new ability, I had to be able to repeat that effort with grace and control before taking the next step. Every little try took time and energy, and every effort was echoed by a need for more sleep. By day 4, I was still spending most of my time sleeping as my brain craved minimal stimulation. It was not that I was depressed, but my brain was on sensory overload and could not process the barrage of incoming information. Gigi and I agreed that my brain knew best what it needed to do in order to recover. Unfortunately, it is not common for stroke survivors to be permitted to sleep as much as they would like. But for me, we felt that sleep was my brain's way of taking a time out from my new stimulation. We acknowledged that my brain was still physically traumatized, and it was obviously totally confused concerning the information coming in through my sensory systems. We agreed that my brain needed quiet time to make sense out of what it had just experienced. For me, sleep was filling time. No, I'm sorry. Sleep was filing time, right? Where she was talking about the filing cabinets. You know how chaotic an office can become if you don't take time to file? It was the same process for my brain. It needed time to organize, process, and file its hourly load. I used to be a secretary for like 7 years, and I loved filing papers, except during the winter because it would dry my skin out so bad. If you're touching papers all the time, the air's already dry. It was like so staticky. All right. I had to choose between physical and cognitive efforts because they both wore me out. On the physical front, I was making terrific progress, regaining my basic stability. I could sit up with some ease now, stand and even walk a little down the hall with lots of assistance. My voice, on the other hand, was weak, since I had no strength to expel air. As a result, I spoke in a soft whisper and my speech was broken and labored. I struggled with finding the right word and frequently confused meanings. I remember thinking water but saying milk. Cognitively, I struggled to comprehend my existence. I still couldn't think in terms of the past or future, so I burned a lot of mental energy trying to piece together my present moment. Although thinking was very difficult for me, I was making cognitive improvement. I'd grown accustomed to my doctor telling me to remember 3 things, and then at the end of our time together asking me what those 3 things had been. Gigi says that she knew I was going to be all right the day he asked me to remember firefighter, apple, and 33, whippoorwill drive. I had failed this task miserably up to this point, but I decided that today I was going to pay attention to nothing else that he had and said, and just repeat the words over and over again in my mind, holding them in memory until it was time to blurt them out. At the end of our visit, he asked me to recall the 3 items. With confidence, I uttered firefighter, apple, something, whippoorwill drive, and it was what, 33? Um, I go up and down the street, knocking on every door until I found the right house. Gigi breathed a huge sigh of relief. And when she heard this, to her, it indicated that my resourceful brain was back on track and she was reassured that I would once again be able to find my way in the world. On that same day, Andrew came for his daily visit, and one of the games he would play with me was to assess my cognitive aptitude, was to ask me, all right, one of the games he would play with me to assess my cognitive aptitude was to ask me to count backwards from 100 by sevens. Holy moly, it's hard for me to count backwards from 100, period. This task was particularly difficult for me because the cells in my brain that understood mathematics had been permanently destroyed. I asked someone for the first few answers to that question. The next time Andrew asked me, I spewed 3 or 4 of the correct responses. I immediately confessed that I had cheated and really had no clue how to begin this task. But it was important to me that that Andrew understood that although certain portions of my brain could not function, other parts of my brain, in this case, my scheming mind, would compensate for its lost abilities. On day 5, it was time for me to go home and get strong enough to endure surgery. A physical therapist taught me how to climb the stairs. With support, then I was released to Gigi's care. I felt physically in peril, and my mother drove like a hosier, like a hosier provincial in downtown Boston traffic. Hosier provincial? Um, Hoosier. Yeah, Hoosier provincial. Okay, I'm guessing like Hoosiers are a team, right? So I don't know that reference, but yeah, if you know what it means, let me know. We draped my face to block out the sunlight. I prayed the whole way home. Okay, chapter 11. So I'm gonna pause and come right back. All right, bye.